Sono qui per presentarvi la nuova edizione di Trieste Next. Il titolo della 14ª edizione di Trieste Next è La vita dentro, dialoghi tra scienze e tecnologie. 3 giorni per riflettere su come la scienza e la tecnologia ridefiniscono la vita, su come le discipline STEM dialogano con le scienze umane e su quali nuove domande emergono per il nostro futuro. Medicina di precisione, intelligenza artificiale, sostenibilità ambientale, robotica, biotecnologie e tecnologie quantistiche sono solo alcuni dei temi al centro di Trieste Next. È questo il fil rouge del festival, con un programma di oltre 100 eventi in inglese e italiano e oltre 300 relatori di fama internazionale. E ancora, il premio Trieste Next Science Book of the Year, le 70 attività per le scuole e i 40 spazi espositivi e laboratori aperti a tutti in Piazza Unità. Prima di accogliere gli ospiti del prossimo evento, a nome dei promotori e copromotori della manifestazione, vorrei ringraziare tutte le istituzioni scientifiche di Trieste, città della conoscenza, e le istituzioni che hanno collaborato con noi, il main partner del festival, i partner e i content partner della manifestazione per il contributo fondamentale. Grazie anche ai media partner e ai partner tecnici. Infine, un grazie speciale ai 200 volontari di questa edizione. Ricordatevi anche di controllare il programma aggiornato degli eventi su www.triestenext.it, al quale potete accedere anche da questo codice QR. Buon ascolto e buon festival!
Type 2 diabetes is one of the fastest growing health crises of our time. In Europe, it affects 1 in 11 adults and is the 3rd leading cause of death. Its increasing prevalence, driven by aging, sedentary lifestyles, and obesity, and progressively affecting kids and adolescents as childhood obesity rises, is having a growing impact. But before diabetes fully develops, there's a crucial, silent stage: pre-diabetes. Around 541 million people globally live with elevated blood sugar levels that don't yet meet the threshold for diagnosis. This is the window for action. If caught early, pre-diabetes is reversible through simple lifestyle changes. Prevention is not only possible, it is powerful. The PRAESIIDIUM project aims to identify and describe the early biological and clinical markers that indicate the transition from health to disease. The goal is to detect prediabetes before symptoms appear, offering a real opportunity to intervene and stop the disease before it starts. Using artificial intelligence, clinical data, and wearable sensor technology, PRAESIDIUM is developing a smart, non-invasive tool to predict individual risk and support healthcare professionals in delivering personalized, preventive care. We can change the future of diabetes by preventing it. Let's act before it starts.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. My name is Fiorella Operto, and I am the Vice Chairman of School of Robotics. We are a partner in PRAESIDIUM, and today 4 speakers will tell you about the daring aim of preventing diabetes even before any symptoms appear. The speakers will be 2 medical doctors, 2 physicians and clinicians, and 2 biotechnologists, and they will speak you about the challenge of working together. Renald Meçani from Graz University and Alessia Paglialonga from CNR in Italy, Jeļizaveta Sokolovska from Latvia University, MD and clinician, and Pablo Giraudi, biotechnologist from International Federation of Liver. Please, you have the floor. Renald?
Hello, my name is Renald Meçani. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm doing my PhD in diabetes technology at the Medical University of Graz. For the PRAESIDIUM project, I coordinate the scientific activities on behalf of the cohort that we are designing. It's a cohort of 75 patients with a family history of type 2 diabetes, but without risk factors, so with lean body weight. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to take part into this panel. My name is Alessia Paglialonga. I'm a research scientist at the National Research Council of Italy in Milan. CNR is one of the partners in the project and is contributing to the project with two separate different teams covering different areas of research. Also taking advantage of the fact that CNR is a multidisciplinary research organization. So for example, we have biomedical engineers, such as myself and people in my team, mathematicians, bioinformaticians, and several competencies that work together within CNR and together with the other partners to address issues in the project. Our role at CNR in Milan is to develop models that are based both on machine learning and AI, so using data, real-world data, as well as developing models that use equations, so knowledge, parameters, and mathematics. And in particular, those models that we are developing deal with physical activity and how physical activity can reduce the risk of developing diabetes in the long term. Whereas models based on AI and machine learning are using data from the real world, from the electronic medical records of patients, to identify risk of prediabetes and diabetes based on biomarkers that are collected in routine clinical care or in primary care, for example. So to understand how those general biomarkers can be used to identify some early measures of risk in the patients. And this is done also in collaboration with clinicians, of course, to understand how knowledge from the medical field can inform the development of models, data-driven or mathematical models. So this is more or less the contributions from CNR in Milan and within this project. And we then have time for more questions in this
Today
respect.
there is a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and in many fields. What do you think about using AI in medical fields?
This is a huge question, $1 million question. So when we use AI within this project, we are not using generative AI, large language models or so. We are using statistical learning, basically, machine learning, so models that are able to learn from data and adapt to data to identify the risk of patients. So I would answer within the context of the project, because talking about AI in health is a really large field, large question. Within this project, well, the contribution of AI is can be meaningful as long as it is developed in a teamwork with knowledge from clinicians. So to identify which characteristics, which features are meaningful, how to interpret the models, and how then the models that we develop can be assessed by clinicians and improved and validated. So the approach is sort of teamwork between, let's say, technical expertise and clinical expertise. Moreover, several of our, let's say, researchers have a background in biomedical engineering, which also helps to have this common ground of discussion and, let's say, collaborate on this. So it's not AI that is just giving us models and we take them for granted or as black box, but it's AI that is developed with multidisciplinary approach. Moreover, we're also using some explainability techniques, so in order to extract some intelligible mechanisms from the models, so not only black box approaches. And this also helps build some communication between the different teams.
Thank you, Alessia. That's what Alessia said is very important also for the ethical implication, you know, because there are a lot of talk about the ethical implication of Gen AI, but also artificial intelligence traditional. Lisa, what's your role in the project and what do you think about this collaboration?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeļizaveta Sokolovska from the University of Latvia. And I'm also a clinician. I'm practicing endocrinologist. So in this project, the role of our group was to collect a cohort of patients of subjects with risk factors of diabetes and pre-diabetes. Could you raise your hands who knows about the risk factors of diabetes? Yes, someone knows something. So yeah, some of us know that increased body weight, maybe family history of diabetes or gestational diabetes previously are risk factors. But also many people they don't know about their risk factors. And it's actually important to know timely and to intervene. So what did we do in the University of Latvia? We decided to pick up one group of patients. It was patients with overweight and grade 1 obesity. And actually patients had to do a lot of work in our project, so they were overwhelmed with sensors. They had continuous glucose monitors. They had Fitbit devices. So glucose monitors were needed to track their blood glucose values and to see how glucose is impacted by physical activity, nutrition, and so on. And Fitbits were needed to track their physical activity so that we could put it all together. And we also asked patients to monitor their food intake. But that was not all. Patients were also asked to take a 6-minute walking test during the study visit. So this is needed to assess their physical activity. Finally they were asked to donate the samples. So the samples then went to Pablo's lab here in Trieste for assessment of biomarkers, and also to Graz for microbiome assessment. And all these data are then fed into Alessia's and groups models. And so why do we need that? As a clinician, I think that we need something that would help us to get this moment and say to the patient, hey, now is the moment when your risk increases. In 5 years, maybe you will get pre-diabetes, and if you get pre-diabetes, the possibility to get diabetes increases hugely. So let's do something about your lifestyle, let's do something about your nutrition. It's a lot of topics inside, how to affect glucose fluctuations and inflammation by nutrition, by physical activity, and so on. But I think this project is one of these starting points to accumulate all this data and get some meaningful impact.
Thank you, Lisa. I imagine it was, I know from the inside that it was not easy for you clinicians to collect data, pre-data, and also data about the effect on regime, dietary regime, and physical activities to biotechnologists, to prepare for models.
First we developed together with the University of Graz the protocol, and also together with our technical partners. So it really, and it was not like the project is started from the scratch. Of course, it started on previously developed models. But to be honest, it's sometimes quite funny and very exciting to collaborate these clinicians and technical and mathematicians, and sometimes it seems like we speak English and they speak Chinese, or vice versa, but it's all the process to understand what is really needed for the model. I remember in the beginning with Renald we had an issue when our mathematical and technical partners, they suggested for example, that their model can predict some biomarker. But we then said this biomarker is very expensive and difficult to measure, and maybe nowadays it's not that important for clinical practice, so we have to take a step back and take something what is really important and can be implemented. Yes, so that was a very exciting way.
Thank you so much. Renald, how was to change your mind, state of mind, from being a pediatric and a clinician to, help and assist, and also to Lisa, biotechnologists who have no idea of the effect, real concrete effect of the diabetes on human being. How was your?
Well, there are two different approaches, so it's quite different. So when you are dealing with patients, it's mostly a straightforward process because you have to follow protocols. There are like guidelines and you follow them. But when it comes to research, you have to think out of the box. And as Lisa mentioned, as Alessia mentioned, it was a collaborative approach, trying to, let's say, solve issues that we had along the way, trying to think in a creational way. So it was quite a fun and exciting process.
Thank you so much. Pablo, can you introduce yourself to the audience and describe your role?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am Pablo Giraudi. I am working at Fondazione Italiana Fegato here in Trieste. As part of the PRAESIIDIUM project, we do different things. Practically, we were able to measure different biomarkers, and so we received samples from Graz and from the other two partners, Graz and UNIL, and so we measure in the blood of these patients several markers that are interesting, are markers that are following the low-grade inflammation in the patients, and these are useful for the algorithms that then Alessia used to improve and to predict the changes from prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And so we measure these markers in the blood of the patients. On the other hand, we were the part that do discovery in biomarkers, so we try to identify new markers that can follow the change from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes. So to do this, we have the possibility to use the omics technologies that are available from the 2005, 2006. So we enter in the era of omics. And so this is something that one time when you went to fish, you can fish, you were able to fish only one fish, but now you can go to fishing with technologies that are able to catch thousands and thousands of fishes. And so this is, in our case, these are proteins, are components that are in the blood. So several years ago, we can measure only 1, 2, 3 at once. But now we are able to measure some, in plasma, for example, the most powerful technology can arrive to 11,000 proteins. And so this gives us, as researchers, a big potential, a powerful tool to discover something that is changing, and will show to you if the disease is in what grade, or if the disease is at the beginning or is evolving, for example. So this was part of our work.
Pablo, thank you. I know that artificial intelligence can detect schemes in pattern that human being cannot. That is importance in our case. You know, you can detect schemes, pattern that human being cannot. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. This is a good question, and of course, artificial intelligence now is a tool that is changing our capacity to analyze the data, because with the old tools, we were able to use programming to find some patterns, but now we have the possibility that, because we are in the big data of biomedical with these tools, so you are able to identify patterns, not only, for example, in different groups of patients, but also more personalized patterns. So, and it's faster. We have a powerful technologies now to do this. Each year will become more faster and more easy, and probably we will not need the necessity to code as researchers. It's not that you have a tool that can do this for you.
Thank you. Renald, what about having an incredible amount of data? Because just recently, I read about this huge agreement for collaboration between Oracle and OpenAI for $300 billion. Can you imagine the amount of data, Renald?
Yes, the amount of data and data are quite important when it comes to AI models in medicine, because we are talking about these models that have been developed in let's say, small cohorts, maybe medical records. On our sites, both in Latvia and at the Medical University of Graz, we have in total 150 patients. And these models are just exploratory, so they are not, let's say, validated in clinical practice yet. So there is a huge need for large cohorts, highly longitudinal in time, with a lot of events to see if the models that we develop are accurate to predict diabetes with high accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. So the data is needed not only for this, but also to generalize for different populations, racial backgrounds, ethnicities, different age groups, and different risk profiles. So it's quite important.
If you could imagine the amount of data for your model concerning diabetes, I mean, it's a gift. They give you a gift, these riches. What description can you give us?
Thank you for the question, and thanks, Renald, for pointing this out. Well, we had a gift, because before the project we were already collaborating with colleagues from Canada, from North America, and we have access to data from 2 million patients. So this was a gift, so we were happy, and this is part of the work we do in PRAESIDIUM. At the same time, that's not yet sufficient to have what Renald and all of us wish. So a model that is able to be accurate, but also applicable to the general population to extent. Because any type of data will have some sort of bias, or some minority populations that are not there, or at the same time, the data that we have are from primary care, which means, okay, we have the general population, people that visit their primary care doctor, but yet not all the people are visiting their primary care doctor on a regular basis. So we tend to have more data from people that are already more aware, more, let's say, more focused on their health. So it's not only a matter of size, but it's a matter of how those data represent the general population. So how much people are represented by those data. So also it's a matter of availability. Unfortunately, we are a bit behind in Italy and Europe, having availability of large-scale data. So having large-scale cohorts is important, but also integration of our data that go into electronic medical records, hospital, primary care, to some common space. So Europe is working towards this aim. We have the regulation on the European health data space, and Europe is trying to support this secondary use of data, health data, to support research and knowledge, and let researchers and clinicians work to develop some methods that can help people as much as possible with less bias as possible. So that's a direction for the future, and this project has helped us not only work on what we have, but understand what we would need to make a step forward towards some models that are applicable on the population to help them reduce their risk.
Thank you. Lisa, if you had to convince a patient to support or to enter in this study, because not all of us would like to know, you would like to know on what pathology you are, heading to die, it's not so, but it's important to enter in this study. And, we women, we are already, under protection for cancer, breast cancer, and other, preventive analysis. So, Lisa, what you are every day you're confronting the effect of diabetes, also pre-diabetes. So, what's your call?
First of all, I have to say that we were quite happy with our participants. So usually we somehow can convince to participate, although it takes the time and is laborious, but we always try to somehow give something back. For example, consultation of nutritionist or some advice from doctor, some small gift for people to take part in this scientific work. But if it would really develop, and I hope that part of our work will come to the patient care someday, so I think it would be nice that a patient comes to my practice, maybe with some minor problem, but I can already assess other parts of his health and, for example, identify a prediabetes risk, and then we can maybe I can timely refer him to nutritionist and also pay attention to the physical activity, because actually a lot of things have been discovered, but it's important to see how they are implemented. For example, for physical activity, I think we all know these recommendations from the World Health Organization. So probably you know how much you have to exercise. Who knows how much you have to exercise a week? So, 150 minutes cardio and plus 2 bouts of strength exercise and also some stretching and balance exercise. So actually, if we calculate, it's more than 3 hours a week, maybe 4 hours a week, and it's showed that it's beneficial. But how do we implement? So maybe we know this 150 minutes, but when I calculate, okay, it means maybe half an hour a day I have to do something. And so here is the role of us, of clinicians, also of course not mainly maybe endocrinologists, but also general practitioners, maybe nurses, dedicated nurses, and somehow to help to work it in the people's life. So here is also one of the things which I could motivate, but also I understand that it's difficult.
Thank you. Renald, how did you motivate I know that you carried out a study with your volunteers, and then a question to both about ethical and privacy. How did you motivate your volunteers? Because it was, maybe you can have to describe, they had to keep, their glucose continuous monitoring, and please.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, it was not quite difficult, to be honest. The fact that the people had a family history of type 2 diabetes and maybe they saw a loved one or a relative.
But yours were completely...
Yes, they were healthy, but they had a family history of diabetes. So maybe the fact that they had seen somebody, some relative, deal with the consequences of diabetes made them, let's say, intrinsically motivated to take part in the study and follow the protocol. And also with the focus group work that we did, we saw that they were highly engaged. I think that also reflects on the values of the youngsters nowadays. The participants in our study were mostly highly educated people from the age of 20 to 30. So it also reflects these ideas about, let's say, making an initiative to contribute to a health study for the better of not only themselves, but also generating data for the betterment of the community and making an impact in society. So it was quite easy.
Lisa and Renald, were you concerned about some biased answer from the model, like wrong positive, wrong negative, etc.? And then I will ask Alessia and Pablo about bias, you know.
Yeah, I think that
your clinical eye, I mean, you rely on your clinical intuition and eye, but a model, you cannot put your hand on the model, so you have to rely and trust the model in this case.
Oh, well, I think that currently we already use some risk scores in clinical practice to identify some risk patients, but they are based not on AI. For example, I don't know, the risk of fracture, and then I can take a decision to start or not to start the treatment for osteoporosis. But with AI, I think we clinicians can use it as a continuation of our competence, as a hint, but we have to be very careful and really not to be brought somewhere else because we train AI on data, and as Alessia said, we need big data sets, but currently we do not have the outcomes for many patients. So really we need these longitudinal cohorts so that we, I don't know, monitor, for example, whole population of Trieste, and then we see what happens in 10, 15, 20 years. But we are currently in lack of such data, so we have to be cautious. But yeah, we have to be open and see what the model says, what we see with our clinician's eye, and also what the healthcare can provide us with. For example, in some countries, the screening programs for diabetes even don't function. So what about pre-diabetes?
Yes. Renald, did you have to change your mind about considering a model as a colleague?
Well, actually, not, I think, because as Lisa already briefly touched, we already use these risk scores which are based on simple statistical learning, like linear regressions, for example. I'm not the expert on the field, but we use such models that aim to predict something. Also, simple statistics makes us understand some patterns or interpret findings better. And this is something that us as clinicians have already been using for many years. To help us make better decisions. So AI is just, let's say, the next generation. It integrates multimodal data, it integrates more data, it's just more powerful, but we are used to these tools, and our work would be very difficult without these tools. So we highly appreciate this next generation of techniques to help us make better decisions, personally speaking.
Well, thank you. Alessia and Pablo, how did you deal with biases? And just explain what they
Okay, thank you. Yes, so we've highlighted that medical knowledge is extremely important. We are not yet giving the models to the clinicians or the patients for their use, because we are in a process of understanding how to bridge models, data, and real-world situations. Yet we are trying to develop some means to estimate, for example, how can we personalize those models? And this is also part of the work we are doing in the project. So bias is there because models overall generate predictions that are based on the samples where they learn from. And those predictions may reflect the so-called bias. So if we have a data set, for example, like the one I mentioned from Canada, we are picturing the situation from North American patients. We will not apply those models to the European populations as they are, because we know that those models are reflecting...
Or Japanese.
Or Japanese, and completely different.
Because you know that in Japan there is a high rate of diabetes.
Yes, so those models are reflecting knowledge that is extracted from the data, and the data reflect a partial picture of the real world and of the different, let's say, characteristics of patients, populations, and also lifestyle. So we tend to have overall, on average, more overweight patients in North America than we have here, for example. So also the predictions that we get from the biomarkers are overall indications that are valid based on the data that are trained from. So bias is always there. We cannot get rid of that bias. So it's important when we interpret the models and we deal with clinicians to understand what is exactly the, let's say, the boundary of the predictions that we made. And by using some explainability techniques, we can extract more information to have a clearer idea of which patient characteristics are driving that decision. So if this patient is classified at higher risk because of body mass index or weight, then we can understand with clinicians if the prediction is reasonable given the set of characteristics of that patient. Or if a different patient is suggested to get a decreased risk of diabetes if he or she decreases their blood pressure, again, this has to be validated based on the characteristics of the patient and the medical knowledge. So bias is a really important aspect, and it's important to characterize, to be aware of where the model is more valid and where it is not. So it's not only accuracy. We may have highly accurate models trained on very specific data, but they would tend to be useless if we wish to apply to populations that are different than the data they were trained from. So it's a really complex aspect, but it's good that, I mean, by this project and our work, we are doing some step ahead in this direction.
Pablo, thank you.
Yes, so I can add to this that, yes, bias are always present in our determination, for example, but talking, because I work with biomarkers, for example, I have a series of markers, 4 or 5, for example. When I talk of markers, are these measures like transaminases or bilirubin or glucose that are changes in your blood, and so it will indicate if there is a diagnosis of disease or not, no? So imagine that you have 5, 6 markers that are following an inflammatory process. But I am doing research, so maybe these markers are working well in my cohort, for example, because generally we work with a group of patients, 100, 200. But to prove that this marker is working well and to select the best, we need to test the marker in several cohorts. So you need to pass from patients that are, for example, lean in the case of diabetes, and then obese, and more obese, and something like that. Or with different diseases, because other disease will affect the values of your marker. So we need to standardize very well the range of these markers and how comorbidities can influence the values. And so then we will select the best marker. So for this, it's very important, for example, to have the biobanks, because we depend on that. So we need the possibility to have these things in Europe, for example, in which if I need different cohorts, I can ask to somebody else that I need this to study this marker, and so they can give me the samples. And this was talking yesterday in another talk in Piazza Unità, but it's really, really important for us.
Pablo, just a key, can you explain that maybe we didn't touch this part, that the study, and the question is for all of you, the study was also based on collecting data through devices like Fitbit, and can you explain this?
I can tell my experience, because I never worked with this type of sensors, but for me they are great, because then Renald and Lisa are the expert on that, on these things. But for me it's interesting that generally when I work in biology, so I can have with the old tools, I can have one determination or several determinations, but only at one point, so at one time point. But now it's the same, like when you go to the doctor and the doctor say, oh, you need to do the analysis for glucose. So you go to the labs, to the hospital, and they take your sample and do one measure in the fasting, in the morning, for example, when you are fasting. But with these sensors, you can follow the measurement on the time, so during a period of 15 days, for example. And so this is something new for me, because I can see these plots with a lot of data during the time, and so we need to have to consider this, that for me was maybe in our labs, and when we work in vitro, we have 3 time points. Now we have a lot. So for this, we need also the new programming, the new computational frameworks. And so for me, it was very interesting to understand this, and to understand that when you measure the things in time, you can see new things. So a lot of things that we are entered in this era in which we are not only take a picture of the patient, but we are starting to create a film practically with limited variables, but we are able to do that now.
Thank you. What about, using all these devices?
Well, I think that we are using more and more the devices, not only us as researchers or clinicians, but people themselves. They use, for example, continuous glucose monitoring sensor for healthy people. It has entered sports science. I have been told my colleagues in sports physiology that in some bicycle races, the use of CGM is prohibited, because then the sportist can know when to take glucose on long marathons. So they use it already. But so also biohackers, maybe you have heard about biohackers, people who want to uncover all the processes in their body for healthy longevity, for best performance. And, but we have to be cautious. So where is this line? So are we sure what we observe is good or bad? For example, when we apply the sensor, glucose monitoring sensor, to a healthy person, actually we do not have guidelines how to interpret. And we as doctors, we usually measured only venous glucose. So you come to the lab, your blood is withdrawn, and they measure glucose in your fasting state. And usually in healthy person, now on the values I will not talk, but it's in certain range. But and if, for example, you have for diabetes criteria, we also had certain range. For example, well, in the values we use in Latvia, it's millimolar per liter and 11 millimolar per liter. If you have more, you have diabetes. So what we observe in healthy people when they eat tiramisu, some of them will have 6 millimolar per liter, but some of them will have 13. I had 13. So first of all, I thought, is it diabetes? No, it's not diabetes. From fasting venous glucose, it's all fine. But during this continuous monitoring, we can see different things. And nowadays, we do not understand what it is. So we need really these long-term studies. to understand what it means.
Interesting.
No, there is nothing for me to add this.
The device, you know, Fitbit and
So
CGM.
The CGMs, as Lisa said, are not quite there yet, at least for the general population. So we mostly use it for the sick. There are some sensors which are coming nowadays, such as ketone measurement, continuous ketone measurements, which help with exercise, people who are into professional trainings and sorts. And the Fitbits are, or let's say other smartwatches, are an important tool where one can watch, let's say, themselves. But there are studies, meta-analysis, which show that they do not have a benefit when it comes to health outcomes in the general population. So one needs to be cautious on how they interpret their Fitbit data, or you must address your Fitbit with a question: what am I trying to find out about myself when using the Fitbit? Is it sleep? Is it steps during the day? Do I want to have more steps during the day to lower my risk of developing chronic diseases? Am I trying to improve my sleep score? But one also needs to keep in mind that these devices, these Fitbits, they are not always 100% accurate. So there is always an algorithm behind it. There are always sensors. They are always an approximation of accuracy. So there is, as Lisa said, a thin line, and one must be cautious when applying this to their life.
Fitbit is a smart, smart wearable, like, you know. Last, Alessia, and then open the floor to questions. Many, please.
Thanks. So I will briefly comment on the use of wearables from, let's say, model development point of view. So having those time series, so data collected continuously, will definitely help us understand better how each single patient sample item in the data set will behave. So there are different behaviors, as also Lisa said, when you, the different reactions that your body has when you eat something or different types of food, as well as when you exercise. So we have those models, we are developing those models based on equations that estimate some average behaviors. But having information about how a given single patient reacts to a single exercise session or to cumulative exercise during the days will definitely help us understand how we can tune those models and identify the optimal exercise dose, meaning duration of session, intensity. Of course, that will have to be discussed and developed with clinicians, but continuous monitoring of physical activity tracking or glucose patterns, it can greatly help personalize the models and have some more, let's say, individualized information also on how the risk can be reduced.
Thank you. So?
Maybe it's better to monitor insulin level or C-peptide instead of glucose, because we know in prediabetes we have some kind of hyperinsulinemia. And, if I eat something sweet, maybe I will have, I don't know, glucose 9 or something. But maybe it's better to know during the day my insulin level, like similar like cortisol. What do you think about that?
I can start. Yeah, thank you. Very interesting question. Yeah, for sure. The hyperinsulinemia is the hallmark of insulin resistance, but currently we cannot monitor it continuously. As I am not aware of such sensors. Also, for C-peptide, also you are right, that would be a better option because of stability, and insulin is cleared by the liver to 50%. But in general, yes, and cortisol. Such sensors are being developed, which is important, for people under chronic stress and for pseudo-Cushing's syndrome. I think with time we will have more of these sensors.
Also affects glucose.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It's also a matter of cost efficiency. So C-peptide has a value in the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, but not always in type 2 diabetes, because you can have insulin resistance with normal insulinemia. And measuring the C-peptide in this case might not tell you the whole situation, what is happening in the background in the body. And also, as I mentioned briefly, cost efficiency. So measuring the C-peptide is a bit more expensive than it would be just doing a finger prick capillary blood measurement or just measuring the HbA1c for a simple diagnosis. But hopefully, with the advancement of technology, we can have like sensors which measure continuously different biomarkers.
But by the way, already from preliminary results of our study, our technical mathematical partners, they already observed some correlation between continuous glucose monitoring data, at least in our Latvian cohort, and C-peptide measurements. So yeah, but not continuous C-peptide. It was like 3 measures. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much and congratulations for the talk. I have to disclaim that I'm part of the project, but I would like to discuss with the audience what is the openness, or how open are the patients to be monitored like this, balancing the benefits they may have or the stress that the continuous monitoring could induce to them. That is one question. And the other hand is, how open are the clinical doctors to incorporate these new technologies in order to get a benefit for the patients and for their daily practice? Thank you.
It's up to you. I mean, you can decide.
Should I continue? Start. Okay. Okay, I'll start from the latter. So when it comes to the doctors accepting new technologies, it's not only a decision that doctors made, so it has to go through regulatory chains. So first we would need to have these large data sets or large cohorts to generalize the, let's say, accuracy of the models, and then a cost-effectiveness analysis. So is this new tool does it justify the benefits of implementing it in clinical practice? And these are special regulatory authorities who make these evaluations. And if such thing comes out as positive, then I think doctors should be highly engaged to use them as tools to help them in their daily decision making.
Considering doctors, for sure doctors have to be sure, and therefore usually doctors implement in their clinical practice something also based on the guidelines. So now we are in the era of evidence-based medicine, so we have to take decisions of the medical societies into account. And I can say from my experience that usually I have now participated in several projects as a medical coordinator dealing with digital platforms and phone apps for doctors, and quite often they are quite reluctant because they are so overwhelmed by their clinical practice, and they have a specific time for visit, and even CGM data analysis takes quite a lot of time. So sometimes you have to, really it's extra time, but I think really, as Renald said, will depend on evidence. So if there will be convincing evidence, then we will discuss with regulatory bodies and try to make space for this time for implementing these solutions. Considering patients, when during COVID times, it was very difficult to put a CGM because people they said, here is this chip. but now it's already easier. So now it's already easier, and people are participating. But it's also can be stressful. So then they come and ask, "But why did I have this dip in the glucose in the night?" I said, "You were sleeping on your arm." And why did I have here up? Yeah, because you ate something sweet. So they also lack knowledge. Maybe some of them lack knowledge to interpret these data, and can be stressed.
Please go on.
When you said about stress, I thought about one question that I would like to ask. So you said that when measuring and collecting the data from the patients, one of them was like food intake or activity levels. And so I'm thinking, do you think there is possibility that the data could be somehow influenced because patients, when they are their food intake or activity levels are measured, they subconsciously start to improve their lifestyle because right now their food intake is measured, so they subconsciously eat better because they are more conscious about that. Do you think there is any influence of that on the data? And also, just a further question, do you think in the future AI can be also implemented to correct the errors that occur and to create more realistic models without some conscious influence of people in a better lifestyle? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point because when people first of all, when a person enters a clinical study voluntary, so it shows that he already has some motivation and to improve the lifestyle. And of course, when being monitored, people can modify. And therefore, of course, long-term monitoring would solve partially this because usually also psychologists have papers about that it's some months, 2 months when you are highly motivated, and then usually the motivation fades. So if you are monitored maybe long enough, 1 year, then it would solve the problem. But it is can be solved with Fitbit when you don't have to do anything about, or maybe CGM you have to put every 2 weeks. But with food intake, of course, it's more difficult. The most easy would be to take photos, but that is again requires something from you. So yeah, we need probably some spy. Scientific spying on you and collecting data, which would then remove this motivation bias.
I can only add that one strength or one measure that we implemented to avoid this bias was that the CGM that we used, the continuous glucose tracker, was blinded. So the participants did not see the fluctuations, because if they would have seen fluctuations, they would have eaten something sweet and they would have had a spike, and maybe that would have influenced their behavior even further. The CGMs were blinded, so we put them in their arm and they went with their 2 weeks as normally they would. So this was something that we used to mitigate the effect of behavior influence when it comes to the CGM.
Model.
Yes, I will briefly comment about how we can maybe mitigate this by using models. This is not yet possible in an automated way, but what we can do is to take advantage of the patient monitoring data to understand how the patient behaves, and so let the model adapt to the modifications of the measures that wearables or devices take from the patient. So to understand, to focus on changes rather than absolute values, and see how those changes can evolve in time. So having some adaptive models that can maybe follow and try to adapt to the individual fluctuations could be helpful, and it is feasible.
Thank you for the great talk. One of you mentioned, I think it was Renald, that for detection of patients at risk, some of the statistical data analysis models higher than the, like hierarchically higher than the logistic regression was used. Can you share, if you're aware of that fact, which machine learning models were used for that purpose?
You mean what statistical models are used for the, let's say, old models or for the new ones?
Yeah, the new ones.
I think this would be a question for Alessia, because she knows more about the
Sure.
mathematical models used, but yeah.
Okay, so within the project we are still combining some, let's say, old, well-established models that are still using linear regression, as Renald said, as well as additional models. So we are analyzing a range of machine learning techniques. We are not relying on a single technique, and so we are using a range of techniques for developing models, classification models, and then applying some explainability techniques to extract, let's say, the logic behind those models. So not relying on a specific algorithm, but using different ones in different settings and different subsets and different data sets to understand, to explore and see which one is giving the more reasonable explanations with sufficient performance on the data. So this is part of the research that we are conducting. So I'm not sure if I got exactly your question.
Pretty much.
Thank you.
To be an active citizen in Europe, we have to be concerned and to intervene in lowering the costs of medical, budget. But were you ready to be under spotlight for how many days? 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? Someone, an intelligence, just spying, what you are doing, in terms of sleeping and physical activity, etc. And then your data, so this profile used pseudo-anonymity in a model. No. How many would? No?
We are getting on the time, but just a final consideration for everybody and for thanking you for being here. It's a pleasure for us to having you all here.
I have to thank Natalia Rosso from Fegato, who made this possible. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, welcome. Listen, no. Thank you.
Fondazione Italiana Fegato.
Thank you. So my final question, just for closing up this beautiful session, is that let's assume we are already in the future. We have the algorithm. We have the possibility to personalize the algorithm in order to predict the risk and to revert the onset of diabetes. We are already there. Your opinion, and we are guessing here, how many of the at-risk population would accept to be in that spot? Because perhaps it's something that I wonder, that all these efforts will finally be accepted. The pre-diabetes is a condition that predicts a risk, but it's not said, I'm not ill already, so I might be or I might not. So assuming that we have everything ready, like in the screening, we have sometimes a low addition to the screening programs to prevent some diseases because people, they don't want to know. So assuming that we are there, what is your feeling about the people? Would they accept this and make something to change, or they still resist according to the future, let's think in the future? That is a personal opinion. Nobody has the answer of that. I know that. So thank you very much.
Just my very short question is, how many Italian kids and kids in the developing countries are already under this threat?
It's It's difficult to say, but we know from, let's say, the prediction models that we already have from simple statistics that even if you tell people you have this risk score of developing this disease or developing this cancer, I'm going to take the simplest example, smoking. We all know that smoking causes a lot of cancers. So, and there are people who still smoke or who still drink alcohol. It comes to being human, to human psychology. So sometimes hedonism, having fun, beats being healthy. So that comes down to education, to the culture that you have inherited, and to 1,000 other factors. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very complicated thing, and also because here we are also influenced by food technology and marketing, and we all know that sugar drinks are not good, but we still see a lot of them on the shelves. Yeah, here the whole world's economy is involved, but I think with small steps, with raising awareness, we can achieve a lot of things.
Well, I'm not a clinician, so not able to predict what patients are going to think, but I think it's also a matter of trust. So some connection with the physician to, let's say, understand the benefits, and maybe also a matter of communication. So from a model development point of view, if we are able to develop models that can help communication with the patients, with some simple visuals that help patients understand how the risk can change with some real behaviors and not in theory. That would be maybe a possible contribution from our technical component to the communication and the awareness raising for the patients.
Interesting. Trust on science. Trust on science. Pablo?
Yes, exactly. I agree about that. That is with dissemination and communication and engaging, and yes, is the connection that creates this change, I think, so that the information need to go to the people and to enter in the conscious part and so in the awareness. Because this, going back to the interesting question that the girls asked to us, yes, with this, I think so that is the only manner that even some subconscious blocks can be released, and so you can put more people from that we decide not to know in the path to know.